Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I plan to do two guides actually related to nomination and the Nominator. One for Kusama and one for Polkadot. This is the Kusama version. It is meant to be investment specific versus technical specific, and I'll get into the technical another time. Why is it investment centric? Because I use these videos quite frequently to support me or for my own ease when helping out others in Discord and on Riot. So one of the things that I find coming up quite frequently is a lot of questions with regards to nomination and you know, how can I get money or how can I stake, you know. So this guide should give you some guidance or some, you know, direction. But I don't want you to leave thinking I'm a financial expert or anything like that. So I preface that saying this is just like, you know, showing you the nuts and bolts. If you do want financial guidance or anything of that nature, you need to contact a professional. Okay, so I'm just showing you where the buttons are and how the maths works. So to declare my sources, I put the wiki first, but I actually watched some videos from Mr. Bill Laboon. He is associated with the W3F, and he gave quite a nice overview on nomination and validation and those sort of things. So in the way I like to learn, I like to see the big picture first and then I zone in. So he was able to give that big picture. I got that big picture from his videos, and then I read the wiki to fill in any gaps. And also, I didn't put it here, in providing support on Discord and Riot, it is a learning experience for me, and I do pay attention to what the seniors have to say. And sometimes they indulge me with some conversation, and sometimes they're like, hey, you could figure it out, dude. I'm not going to respond. Right? So, yeah. So, Mr. Bill Laboon, I hope that this video pays homage to yours. And, you know, I hope you don't copyright me or anything like that, you know. So, okay, so let's get into terminology. There are other networks that use this proof of stake concept, and you know, there are some terms that, you know, seem to be going back and forth between the different networks, and I just want to kind of tie things down for the Polkadot Kusama, you know, system. So yeah, one thing to note is that with Kusama and Polkadot, there's a little n in front of the POS for proof of stake, and that little n is nominated. So I note that in the documentation. All right, so we get into the bullet points. The first one, and well, I'll just kind of circle the first two. It's the nominator and the validator, and those are the two main players that, you know, we'll really be discussing today. And again, investment standpoint. So what is a validator? Okay, so I will get into the nitty-gritties, but when there is a reward per era, and an era in Kusama is 6 hours, that reward is split amongst the validators. And then the validator would then, he collects the reward. And any nominators that backed him, it is split amongst the nominators based on your stake. So let's just sum it up. The validator collects the money. Next, nominator. The nominators are the guys who back the validators. Right? They put their bond and they say, hey, I believe that validator is a good validator. And you know, he will perform his duties properly, and because of that, you get your cut. So who is a nominator from the investment standpoint? The nominator is the guy who staked, right? But the terminology that's used is bond. He bonded, he placed a bond. And the next thing is that he also supported the validator. So there are two steps versus in other systems where you may just do one step. Hey, I bonded. You bond and then you nominate. So that will be covered later on. Third bullet point, active. A validator does not necessarily participate in the production of blocks and getting the reward. He can be active active and collecting rewards and stuff, or he can be on a waiting list. So the concept is that there's this pool, and only a certain number of validators from that pool are taken and put to work. Fourth bullet point, bond. Well, I think most would know this is your stake, and once you have bonded, it's locked in for it is locked in, full stop. And you have to initiate an unbonding process that takes 7 days on the Kusama network. Okay, so last two, on-chain, it just means that you are bonding, or you're doing your staking or you're nominating or whatever the case may be on the Kusama network itself. And off-chain really means that you're using an exchange or third party or something like that. Next. All right. So getting started, you have that choice whether you want to do on-chain or off-chain, and I will do some pros and cons as to give you some direction, which might help you, make your decision. What are some of the things that help you decide whether you want to go on-chain or off-chain? One, it has to do with your stake. To date, at the time of recording this video, there is no minimum amount required for staking in Kusama. I will provide a link that can always give you an up-to-date representation of that. But to date, you can stake with as little as, 1 Kusama or half a Kusama or whatever the case may be. The second, whether you go on-chain or off-chain, is your time. The on-chain process is a lot more involved. I will go into those details, but if you just want to click a button and say stake and collect a reward, you may look at off-chain solutions. Risk tolerance. With great the risk reward concept applies here. It is possible that you may not gain, so you may get 0 for a particular era, or in the case of a slash, which I will discuss later, you may get a negative. And everyone wants to gain, but no one wants to lose. And if you're not paying attention with the on-chain solution, you may be more prone to losing than just clicking a button and letting someone else handle it. Okay, so let's look at off-chain. So we have exchanges like Kraken, Binance, and perhaps others. And I know that sometimes they limit how much you can bond and so on. So you need to pay attention, and this thing is evolving. My information is probably about a week old. So I compiled my information and then I recorded the video today. So there was a little lag, and be that as it may, 1 week is a lot of time. Things can change. So always do your research. Just use this as a general guide. With regards to benefits, off-chain solutions offer the following. You can get entry to bond, even though the on-chain solution has a minimum bond. You can bond with less than that. Now, again, with Kusama, at this point in time, there is no restriction. You can bond with as little as possible. There is a little thing, but as little as possible. Let me try to keep this very simple. If that should change, so let's say in the future, you must bond one Kusama or more, you would find that the exchanges will still allow you to bond with less. Okay, so it's because of the way that they work, and I won't get into that detail, but that's a general concept. Its second point is very simple. You buy your Kusama, you hit bond, and that's it. You collect your rewards. I mentioned that on-chain, to unbond, it requires 7 days. And usually on these exchanges, and in general off-chain, there is little to no unbonding time. And I think, you can put a little asterisk to be confirmed. Kraken has a 7. They can unbond, and they have unbonded in many cases very, very quickly. But I think they have a little fine print that they reserve the right to 7 days to execute. So they will try to do it as much as they can. But I guess if everyone's unbonding at the same time, it will cause a problem. We go to bullet point 4, an environment for resale. Yeah, as soon as you unbond, you can get that on the market and convert that to your currency of choice. Or, then go and buy another token. I hope it's Polkadot. Finally, fixed rates of return. They deal with all of the back-end stuff, and I think, like in Kraken, I think it's 12%. They basically say that your APY or APR or whatever it is 12%, right? That's it, and they will do what they need to do to get you that. So for people who just I was lazy investors, and I mean this with no offense, it might be the right thing for you. So let's look at the cons. Payouts are less frequent. So those who are staking or nominating on Kusama, payouts would be every 6 hours. That's an error, every 6 hours. And while the payout is made every 6 hours, someone actually has to click a button to get that to your account. So that may not be every 6 hours, but just note that the system, in terms of its disbursement, every 6 hours. A con, private keys are held by the exchange. That's a big no-no for many, and it is a big no-no for me as well. I do, although I'm a pretty stand-up guy, you never know. Sometimes if someone decides to say, hey, too many people are selling Kusama, we're going to just temporarily lock you out your account, or we're going through maintenance. These things can happen. Let's say you want to access your Kusama and there's maintenance. You're bad. It's your cash, and personally, I rather have my own private keys and hold my own information. Some may not like that. There is some responsibility to doing so, and if you're not comfortable, well, it might be a benefit to you. And I leave the last point. No mechanisms for community participation. So if you're off-chain, don't expect to be able to vote. That will certainly be a challenge, or participate in the council, or any of those governance aspects, which I hope to cover some videos on it later. So you don't get that option. So let's look at on-chain. On-chain, you can use polkadot.js, which is my preference. And you can also now use Ledger Live. That's a recent development, fairly. So I do note that I think Ledger Live has like some of the core functionality. I'm not sure if it has all of the functionality, but that should evolve over time. Benefits, well, you get payouts sooner, and sooner is always good when you're doing compounding. You have the potential to earn more by good validator selection, and at the end of this presentation I'll do a little Excel so you can see some numbers. Your keys, your KSM, again, you know, lending on that point that, you know, you can't really get locked out, well, unless you do something, you know, silly yourself. You can participate in community voting, so a lot of those are nice benefits, but there are some cons. Minimum bond required, and as I said, that's a little asterisk because at this point in time that number is 0, right? So you should be okay, but it can change, so I note it nonetheless. To really benefit, you require frequent monitoring. You have to be active in this thing to really reap the rewards. Third point, it requires some understanding of what's going on, and I hope this video helps, so maybe we can strike through that point at the end of this video. And the last point is that there's an unbonding period of 7 days. Okay, so how do we get set up? Now, I'm not going into these details in terms of a tutorial. I think Mr. Bill LeBoon's video can help, so it will be linked and you can take a look at that. Here are some of the major points. You need to set up your accounts, you need a stash, and you need a controller. The stash will have most of your KSM, and this is where, you know, really where your bonding occurs. You need a controller with a nominal amount. If you want to put like 1 KSM, 0.5 KSM, something in it, just to deal with some of these transactional fees. Now, I'm not too sure, but I believe that the relationship with a controller and a stash, it's to protect or to minimize the exposure of your stash and the interactions with it. So basically the controller he acts as the shield, if you want to put it that way. And he, you know, if there's any compromise or, you know, anything outlandish happens, the controller, he faces more risk, and because he has such a nominal amount, the risk is not that bad. And the stash is really like, you know, cold storage guy, he's all in the back, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that's the reason why there's that stash controller relationship, or why you need a controller and a stash as compared to some of the other platforms. So key points: put most of your stuff in the stash, keep a little in another account called the controller. So now that you have those two accounts created, you need to create a stash, and when you create a stash, it will ask for you to declare what's the stash account and what's the controller account. Now, I believe this is I'm using this guidance from a ledger perspective. I believe you can just click the plus nominator, and you know, it may ask for the same bit of information anyway. So when you create that stash, you need to look for 3 dots on the right, and you need to bond. So this is really your bond, this is your commitment, and you know, this is like the first step in as compared to the other networks, because other networks you basically just bond, but in in Kusama, you need to bond, and then you need to go through another process called nominating. So some people think, hey, I bonded and that's it. I should be watching the cash roll in. That's not the case. You bond, and then we go to step number 3. You need to now nominate validators. So to do so, I recommend that you go to the targets page. So you go to network staking, and then there's a little targets tab, Click on that and you will see all the validators listed. You can nominate up to 16 validators. I do lend on the point I made earlier that not all of the validators make it to the active set. So if you only selected one and that nominator didn't make it into the active set, then you don't get a reward for that era, and you have to hope that he gets nominated in the next era, which is every 6 hours. So basically, when you select more, it increases those odds that you can get a validator that's in the active set. Generally, I am using that term, and I said it in a funny way, because the wiki says generally you can only have one active validator. So even though you have multiple of your validators, let's say you chose 16 and 10 of them got in to the active set, generally you will only have one validator as active. However, later on, there is some acknowledgement that you may have more than one, and if so, your rewards are split proportionally between the two validators. I've never seen it happen, but you know, I just throw it out. It may never happen. I don't know why that terminology was there, but it is there, and I represent it as such. The final point is that you may not get any rewards from validators that have too many nominators. So basically, if a validator is too attractive and he gets 113 nominators, only the first 128 will receive a reward. Everyone after 128, so that's Mr. 129 and 130, they don't get a reward for that era. So all of these things, in terms of the nomination, it requires some understanding and some work. And if you put in that work, you may get a better reward than off-chain solutions. So with that said, how are we going to select these validators? So there are some financial aspects, and then we go into other aspects. So the financial aspects. A validator has a commission associated, and he selects that commission. That commission is really taken out, as I had mentioned before. There is an overall reward that is distributed each era. The reward is split amongst the validators, and I don't get too much into that, but it is split. And just for discussion's sake, we are saying it is split equally. When that split occurs, and each validator gets their share of the overall reward, they take their commission up front. So if the reward is 100k SM and there are 10 validators, then each validator gets 10 KSM, right? So they get 1/10. If it is that the validator had a 10% commission, he will get 10% of 10 KSM, and that is 1 KSM. So he takes that up front. So that's his. So he got 10, he took 1 for his commission because he takes that up front, and that leaves 9 for everyone else. And that leads to point number 2. Everyone else includes him because he put a stake, and it is split proportionally between everyone else based on your stake. So that 9 is split with everyone else. He took his 1, the validator took his 1, and then 9, he's going to get some of it based on his self stake, and then everyone else, including you, who may have backed him as a nominator, you get a cut of the 9. Now I said that the validators get an equal cut. It's not quite true. So when there's that general reward, which I referred to as the 100 KSM, the validators, and if there are 10 validators, they don't necessarily get an equal cut. It depends on what they have done during that era. If you generated a lot of blocks and you were quite successful and all of those positive things, you get more. It's based on era points. And that's something that it gets a little complicated, but I'll just show you how to look for it, and note that if a validator is getting a lot of era points, that's a good thing. So let's look at other aspects. First of all, when you select a validator, you want to make sure you can contact him in case something goes wrong or you have a question or something like that. And one of the easiest things to look for is that you look for a verified on-chain identity, or basically one with a name and a little tick to the left of it. It's like a green circle with a white tick. Uptime, of course, you want to make sure that the validator node is up and running 24/7, no downtime. There's a term I'm going to use in point number 3 called slashing, and slashing is a deduction of a removal of some of the bond based on undesirable actions. And undesirable actions may be things like staying offline for quite a long period of time, a significant period of time, or doing something malicious, representing your transactions or blocks or whatever the case may be in a malicious way. And for these things, you lose a percentage of your bond, and it affects not only the nominators but the validators as well. Everyone gets a share of that slashing. So this is the negative aspect of the investment. An investment has a risk, so you can't get that percentage reward, or you can lose if you choose a bad validator. And the reason why I said persistent is that there are times that a validator may be slashed, and it was a one-off instance. So it's important to look at probably when that slashing occurred, and did it occur anytime thereafter. And as we go along, you may see where it may be useful for you to invest in a not so popular validator, but one that you believe is up and coming. Fourth point, fluctuating commission. So if a commission, as I described earlier on, if a commission is 10%, the validator takes 10% upfront. However, if we look at if the commission is 100%, then that means that validator collects everything. And even though you nominated him, you don't get anything. And should that happen, I mean, if you're blindly nominating, you nominated a few validators and you don't check back until like a week or something like that, or you're only checking at your, just to see if you're getting any overall rewards on a daily basis, and you miss this validator could claim the whole reward. He may entice you with 3 or 0 or 5 or something like that in the earlies, and as you come on, he switches it to 100, and he runs that for a few eras, and then he goes back down to 3 to attract some more people, or hoping that you didn't notice. So that is one aspect. Also, if it is fluctuating between reasonable figures as well, let's say between 0 and 10, it may not always put you in the position that you like. So stability in terms of commission is always preferred. Well, that and a low commission. But I digress. We will see those calculations later. And finally, the frequency that the validator is in the active set. Obviously, you would like to get validators that are getting a reward. And if they aren't, well, that doesn't make it worth your while. So I'm just looking at the targets page, well, a snip of the targets page. And we can see that some of this information is, quite, it's to the forefront. And let me pull up my pen. Okay, so we have payout. So that's the first one. The payout gives you an idea of when last this validator was in the active set. So we can see Joey was there recently. So he got a payment quite recently. So he was recently in the active set. The next one is the nominators. Okay, so we would notice, remember I told you it's like 128. Joey is on 109, and I mean no disrespect to Joey. So he basically, if that goes above 1, well, actually, I would think he's probably on 28, there are many people who would nominate you, and based on that nomination, some of them go with you and some go with other validators. So when you get into that active set, you may have some active nominators and some inactive nominators, and I believe that's what these two numbers represent, active and inactive. So Joey, you have my apologies. Commission, well, that one's pretty straightforward. I think we discussed that. Total stake, well, that's a sum of the own stake and the other stake. Okay, and then there's a general representation of the reward. Now, something that I found it was almost hidden. It's the checkboxes on the target page. You can select nominators and then nominate them directly from this page. If we look very closely, right there, that's a checkbox. So you can click that, and when you click it, you will to the top of the page you will see set nominator. It was quite obscure, so I hope others take note of it. So from just this page you can select your validators, sorry. And this little graph thing here provides you with some statistics. Okay, and I will go into some of those. It provides you with some graphs, sorry, that you can make some decisions based on. So forgive me for my crazy arrows as we move forward to the next slide. So this is a little graph that I was telling you about, that little button. There we go, that looks like a better arrow. Okay, when you click on it, you see these. So let's take a look. Era points. As I said, you would like to get a nominator, a validator that's generating a lot of era points. The little gray one is the average, and because the era points fluctuate so often, my recommendation is you look at the average. And as you're selecting your validators, try to pick the ones that get a lot more era points. It More hero points means that you get a bigger share of the overall reward. Your validator gets a bigger share, and if he gets a bigger share, you get a bigger share. So that's it for hero points. Let's go to elected stake. This, I believe, it has to do with the backing that you get from your nominators, and perhaps even if you're in the 1000 validator program, what is actually elected to you, so that you can meet the minimum requirement to become in the active set. Okay, I believe, well, that's 4041 at the moment. Rewards. This is actually something that you may want to focus on as well. This is how much Kusama is, how much Kusama the validator received for a given era. So it actually, if we look at the average, it's probably about 0.7, somewhere between 0.6 and 0.8. If we look at the gray line, maybe tending closer to that 0.6. And that's every era. So every 6 hours, the validator himself collects that bigger reward of 0.6. And he takes his cut, and then everyone splits that 0.6, the rest of it, So don't go away thinking, that the rewards are, very, very huge and stuff like that. It's a little bit at a time, but I guess it stacks up. I would like to draw reference to the peak. And you would notice that the peak corresponds to the era points. There is a direct correlation between era points and rewards. So there is a peak, and at that point where this particular validator earned 180 era points, he also got a very high reward just above 1.4 KSM. Again, that's the overall reward. He takes his commission from that, and then everyone else, including himself, splits the rest. Okay, and finally, we take a look at the commission on this end. And as we can see, this particular validator was at 1% for most of the time. And in this era, he dropped to 0 for some reason. So nothing too alarming. Okay, so I black screen you while I load up Excel, and there we go. Great. So what I have done is try to put together a little scenario and some mathematics to describe or to demonstrate how much you should expect from a payout every era, and some of the dynamics that are involved. So I created a scenario in which there are 2 validators, 1, 2. There's a commission, the own stake, other stake, and total stake. I mean, the numbers are there, you can read it out. What I tried to do with validator number 1 is position a validator that the commission is high and his own stake is low. So he looks very unattractive to someone just looking on, because 1, he has a high commission, so you're like, hey, well, when my split, I'm a nominator, I'm going to get less. His own stake is low. Well, I say low, but that's still quite a lot to, normal people like myself. So in comparison, or relatively, his stake is low. And this may lead a nominator to think, hey, he doesn't have enough skin in the game. He's this does not look as attractive. So let's look at number 2. Number 2 has a low commission and he has a high stake on his own. So he looks very attractive. So what has happened, because number 1 is not as attractive, he didn't get as many nominators staking behind him. And that's really what other stake is. That's the nominated stake. And as a result, the total stake is much less for validator 1 than it is for validator 2. Okay? So let's look at table 2 where we look at outcomes. So there was a payout of 1.04 KSM and I'm going to apply that to both validators. The nominator, which will be yourself, invested 10 KSM and you were associated with, and we will do validator 1 and validator 2. So if we look at the commission, which is in column D, we would notice that the commission is higher. The validator gets a higher commission, as expected, 5% versus 2, higher commission in validator 1. As a result, the rest that is split by the nominators and the validator self-stake, everyone else, the amount for validator 1 is less than validator 2. The validator gets his cut based on his stake, and we would note that his cut by stake is less on validator 1 than validator 2. That's because validator 1, he just put 100, and validator 2 put 1000. The nominator payout on validator 1 is actually higher than validator 2. And you may ask why. Well, the reason is that the total stake was much less than in validator 1 and validator 2, and your percentage increased because of that. So we don't need to get into the basic maths with numerators and denominators, but your numerator is constant and your denominator increased with validator 2, resulting in a lower value. I did that. Validator payout, not too important for this tutorial, but it shows that even though the validator had a higher commission for validator 1, he actually got much less than validator 2. So it goes to show that you can't just look at commission and own stake and make a good decision as to what the outcome will be for your payout. You need to take into consideration the total value of the stake, and I think that all of that information, as I showed in the last section of the presentation, that information is there in the targets page. So I conclude this tutorial or this guide with that. I do hope it helps. So there's a lot of it's not as easy as one may think, and you really need to weigh this in, and I hope that I've given you all the information that you need to make a right decision as to whether you stake on-chain or off-chain, and if you do decide to stake on-chain, that you do the right things. The nominator is an underestimated role, in my opinion. I think too many people, there are too many, and I don't mean any insult, lazy nominators, and you do have a role in the whole ecosystem by selecting good validators, right? So I hope you go forth and select good validators, and look out for my other tutorials, and that's it. Take care. Bye-bye.